Now we're going to move on to those puffs of dust which occur before everything breaks apart. So again, imagine that this is the foreground over here, and we have little puffs of dust that make a giant wave really quickly from the foreground on towards the temple. And think of it as these big old puffs of dust which occur along the edges of our main plates. So they occur along the edges and then everything breaks apart. Now there's all kinds of different ways you can go about this, but I thought it'd be fun to introduce the pyro burst source node because that'll give us nice little poofs or plumes of particles that can basically be spawned wherever we specify points. And so imagine that there's a point right here. It's along one of the plate boundaries. With the pyro burst source node, we can go ahead and make these little poofs of particles, and we can turn that into volumes, which then we can use a pyro solver on to create the final dust effect. So yeah, even though this isn't technically RBD, that's okay because at a certain point you need to mix in pyro with RBD to get the full effect. So the first step in all this is to create these points which live along the boundaries of the plates. So let's say that this is a plate right here, and we're just trying to isolate the points which live on top. Well, there are a few ways we can do this, but the easiest way is to take the original Boolean information that we used to make this piece in the first place and output the B inside A group so that we get only the polygons which exist along here. So imagine this as basically like a ribbon of polygons that make up this whole thing. So, you know, we have, that wasn't so good. We have this whole thing. It's like a little strip of polygons, right? Once we have the strip of polygons, we basically have points all along here. So, you know, imagine all kinds of different points. We then need to only isolate the top points right here. So we'll take this big old piece, the entire terrain, translate that downwards in Y, and then we can use a group sop to only group the top points which don't intersect with the entire terrain. So that's how we're going to isolate these top points. Now, once we have the top points, this is going to serve as the basis for the pyro burst source node. Now, don't worry if you don't know what the pyro burst source node does yet, because this is a fairly new node that was just introduced with Houdini 18.5, I believe. So this is brand new stuff, but what it will basically do is create this little puff of particles, and this is going to be perfect for creating our initial volumes. Now, there's all kinds of different settings that we can change on this, but what's really the most relevant to us is this burst animation. We basically have a start frame, so let's say that start frame is 38, and as soon as we hit the start frame, it's going to go forward and do its thing. So with that in mind, we need to find a way to change this start frame value starting from the foreground, so a lower start frame over here and a later start frame down in the background. So let's say that this might be a start frame of 30. We need to find these points and assign them a value that's lower so that that can be the start frame. And then over here, let's say that that's going to be a start frame of 90 or something like that. This will ultimately give us that wave effect where basically all the particles over here trigger before these ones down here. And we can achieve that wave through these values, and that will control the animation. Now, one thing to also know is that we'll have to manually create these values. And so what I think is a good way of doing this is we could just take a volume. Let's say that we do the, the bounding box thing that we did before when we were masking things off with volumes. Let's say that we do that for this whole thing, right? So we got a big old fog volume, covers the whole terrain. Well, we can create a ramp with that volume. We can add noise to that volume. We can fit those values between, let's say, 0 and 1, and then we can remap to whatever values we want to indicate the start and end frame. So we could remap that to, let's say, 30 and 90, and then we could put noise in those volume values as well to add a bit of variety to when these things start off. So that's going to be the overall game plan here of how to create these dust puffs and stuff. That doesn't include the actual simulation, but that'll at least get us our sourcing, which will probably be the most weird part of this whole thing. So let's give that a shot in the next video.